Okay, I took everything apart last video, and now putting the stuff back together. So I assembled everything on the left side. The weather wasn't very nice, so I figured I'd take care of it and not mess around doing any video. But I didn't assemble this side. So this is a passenger side. So the first thing I'd just go over real quick is what I've always found to be one of the harder things to do with these front ends is the control arm bushings. This is your control arm bushing off the car. Basically it's a lollipop, which is the big metal housing, and it's got a control arm bushing. This is what you buy. This is what came in the kit. Now, I've always had problems getting these in and out, and on the left side, the driver's side, what I did, I used I got it out of there with a big mallet, and I put it in with a big vise. It's a real pain. So I bought this hydraulic cylinder prior to take out a front wheel bearing of a BMW. I retrofit it. Basically, I made some adapters and such. And I said, what the heck, I got it. I paid for it. Might as well try to use it. So I made an adapter to go from the 3/8 or 3/4 16 to a half-inch bolt here, basically. Had to do some fiddling around. So I'm going to assemble this and see how it works. Because usually to get these out, you put it on top of something and beat the crap out of it, or take it to somebody who has a press, which I don't have a hydraulic press. Actually, now I do. I got this 5-ton cylinder. So let me assemble this, get this ready, and let's see if I can pull the thing off. Okay, so I got it all assembled. Here's the head of the hydraulic, a spacer, something that the lollipop fits into, that the bushing will go through, I should say. The lollipop sits up against it, and this is going to get pulled back in. It's going to go that way when I start pumping this thing. So I got the pump over here, and I'm just going to push on this, and it takes a little bit of force to get it to go. You can see it disappearing now. So the thing is popping right out. So that's pretty sweet. So this works, and I'll flip this around, and I'll set up the bushing, and I'll actually use this same setup to push it back in. It'll be much nicer again than what I've been doing. Usually I put it in a vise and twist and twist and twist. This takes a lot less effort than that. So that's it. So here's a new control arm bushing. I'm getting ready to put it in a lollipop, and you'll note with these control arm bushings that there's a little arrow on the right corner of this, right there, and that lines up with this bulge right here. So you have to just understand that they're supposed to line up and press it in accordingly. So another thing is when you push these in, this goes towards the car. There's a counter bore here. So that part, and it seems like these counter bores have a different taper on this side than this side, where the control arm itself goes into. So I try to put that longer taper, as you're putting it on the control arm. I'll show you how to push this on in a second here. But anyway, I put that longer taper, so the longer taper goes on. That way you're not pushing the thing on that real sharp step right here. Gives you a little chance to get it in there. But let me set this up in my little handy-dandy press thing I got going here, and I'll push it on. Now here I got it set up to press back in. So we got the lollipop here, the bushing, I got my pusher here. And once I get far enough in, I'll have to put a spacer back here, because this bushing should stick out equal distant on either side of this lollipop. The bushing is quarter inch bigger, so it should sit out an 1/8 inch on either side. So this doesn't have a recess in it like this nice piece of aluminum does. So I'll put that in once I get a little bit closer. So we should just be able to crank this, pump this. You can see it marching right back in there. This thing works. This thing works very sweet. Now you can feel it's actually straightened itself out, and it's sort of given up. It's just going right in now. To do this in the vise, it's a lot of messing around. And there I can feel it hitting, so I'll stop right there. I'll turn the camera off, and I'll again put the spacer under there and push it the rest of the way in. So The next thing we'll do is pre-assemble the control arm bushing that's been pushed into the lollipop. It's been a good day. Amazing how easy it went in with the power of hydraulics. So we're going to push this on the control arm itself. One thing I like to do is with the control arm, these are very tough to get on again. I'll hit this with my belt sander and put a little bit of a chamfer on this, bigger than what they got, and that way it gives a little bit of time to get in there. Right now, with it being such a small chamfer, you're like pushing rubber and just making a mess. So I'll chamfer this up in my belt sander a little bit to give me a little added advantage about getting it in there. And I'll actually put a little bit of waterproof grease in here too, and it'll pop right on. Otherwise, again, they're a bear to get on. So once this is done, it's all a piece of cake after this. Here's a control arm with the bushing. You can see the amount of chamfering I did in the belt sander. You know, the bushing sits further back than that, so I can't see it causing any kind of grief. You know, it makes assembly a lot easier. You googe it up with a little bit of waterproof grease, and you can push these on. You know, put it in the vise and push on it. You know, just put your body weight on it; it'll go right on. And that works pretty well. Like I said, I've wrestled with these things a couple times, and that's definitely a good way to go. Putting a little chamfer on there and it slips right on. Here I'm putting the control arm on the car, and I wasn't going to really take much video of putting it back together, because if you can get it apart, for the most part, you can get it back together. It's usually a lot nicer materials you're working with. But one thing that I explained, you know, taking tie rod ends out and now putting it in, sometimes you try to tighten the bolt up. In this case, I'm trying to tighten up this control arm point here. There's a nut back here, and it would just spin. The nuts are, you know, they're nylox, so they have a little bit of stickage associated with them, and the shaft would spin inside the ball. So what you see here is I put the jack underneath it and jack the car up a little bit, you know, put a little pressure on it, and that locks that taper of that shaft for that ball in place, and that holds it so you can tighten it down. So just a little trick. Maybe you know it, maybe you don't. If you do, good. If you don't, maybe you learned something. Okay, here you see I got the hub getting ready to put back on here. I got the control arm on. I got that little dog bone thing there. I tightened the two bolts back here with a control arm bushing. Not a big deal. And before, on the other side, I showed you I wired this hub assembly up. I did the same with this one. Figured don't even mess taking the ABS out. I'll just wire it up. So now I'm putting it back together, and I'll leave the wire on there until I get this thing connected. Then I'll disconnect the wire and, you know, attach these other parts. Now with these cars, if you look at it, this is probably a good time to look at this. Realistically, there's not a lot of adjustment on the front end of a McPherson Strut car. What you have is the strut itself. You know, there's no adjustment there. You got some bolts here. You know, there's no adjustment there. The only thing with this car, and I didn't put it on yet, is the tie rod ends. You can adjust basically the front end of this car, the toe in. So if this car was running fairly straight, the tires weren't wearing erratically, my take is if you put the tie rod ends, new ones, back on, and you do a string alignment with this, you're pretty much good to go. And the next video I'm going to show you how to do a string alignment on the car for the front end. The back end, quite honestly, of any of these BMWs has a lot more adjustment than the front end. They have a toe in and they have a camber, which I've done that again without taking it to the shop, and I've got pretty good results out of it. But in the next video I'll show you how to do it with a string, a piece of mason twine I'll put around the car, and get the steering wheel straight, and set up the front end, give you about 1/8 inch of toe in, no big deal. So I think that's about it for this video. I actually might show you one more small video clip once I get the brakes, put them on, but this is just about it. So hopefully you enjoyed this, and again, maybe I'll get one more video clip in here. Now just a little assembly trick. I guess I'll have a couple more videos, but these are the pins for your brakes. Your brakes slide on these pins. You know, they have a 7mm hex on this side, and whatever the hell, looks like an M8 on that side. But anyway, your brakes slide on that. So anytime I take the calipers off, which we did for the front end, I'll shine these up a little bit of Scotch-Brite. It doesn't take a lot, just shine them up, get the crud and corruption off there, and put a little bit of waterproof grease on them. That really goes a long way for getting your brakes to work the way they should. So just a little tip. And like I said, I'll probably do one more video again putting the tie rod end on, but we're getting close. Here I just put the tie rod back in. I screwed this in here, and when we took it apart, you saw me tapping this. This is basically a lock ring here, so you gotta get around the backside with a chisel and smash that over. You don't want this thing coming loose at the worst possible time. But anyway, don't forget to put that on. Now I'll put the boot on, this boot here, and I'll just reuse these clamps. If you look at them, you know, they're no big deal. You can put the hooks back in the holes, or the holes in the hooks, and just use your side cutter pliers and recrimp the clamps. That way it keeps the water out of here. You got one here and a bigger one back there. So pretty much done here. I'll just once I get the boot on, of course, I'll put the tie rod in, and I got it loose. Well, it's somewhat loose, but I got it somewhat loose, and we'll be able to put the car down. I'll put it on a couple pieces of cardboard so it slips around pretty easy, and we'll adjust the toe in, and we should be good for a drive.